Yeah, oh, okay.
Right, good evening everybody. Thanks for coming along, and hopefully you might learn something from the presentation. I can't guarantee it, but I started playing with amateur satellites in 1990, and in those days I think it was RS-10 or an RS-11, and you used to be able to go up on the HF bands. I think you used to go up on either 20 metres and come out on 10. I can't remember which way it was, but that's when I first started getting interested in orbital satellites, or OSCAs as we refer to them. Orbital satellites carrying amateur radio. So that's what the OSCAR means. Not the one you get the trophy at the Film Awards or whatever it is. So I hope tonight to be able to show you a little bit about the different types of satellite, the kind of different modes you can use, and perhaps some information about how you can work them yourself if you were interested in that. Right, so what are they? Purpose-built satellites, which obviously are launched into orbit for use by licensed amateur radio operators. Obviously they're put into orbit for other purposes as well, but in respect of us, we're talking about the ones which are for amateur use. Often referred to as OSCAs, orbiting satellites carrying amateur radio, a designation assigned by AMSAT, which is the Amateur Service for Satellite Services. And I think they've got a colloquium coming up at Milton Keynes in the next few weeks or so. So the orbital classes and typical attitudes. I don't know why I've got that slideshow thing on there, but it's on there somewhere. I can't get rid of it. Low Earth orbiting satellites are probably the ones which I'm most interested in. And these are mainly doing sort of polar orbits, going across the different, around the Earth. Some of them do elliptical orbits as well, but the ones we're talking about are from 400 kilometres to 1,000 kilometres above the Earth, 248 to 620 miles above the Earth. And obviously, because of that, they're travelling pretty fast, these things, so you get quite a lot of passes during a day. Different satellites obviously have different pass rates, but you get fairly brief window of opportunity because the footprint is not that high, so you don't get a big area of coverage. For example, the International Space Station is one of them that we might be talking about. You've got medium Earth orbit satellites. They've got a longer orbital period, and they're quite a bit higher. But they're less common, obviously, in amateur radio use. Examples might be GPS navigation systems. You know, when you're doing your GPS, you know, you've got multiple satellites which are obviously covering different areas of the globe. And then, of course, you've got the one which Andrew uses mainly, which is the geostationary satellites, much higher altitudes. And they're basically fixed. And when I say they're fixed, they're actually rotating at more or less the same speed as the Earth rotates. So they always give the appearance of being static. The QO100 is an example of that, and that's about 22,500 feet. 22,500 miles, beg your pardon, above the Earth, sitting over Central Africa somewhere. So that's that one. They've been in use for quite some time. The first one was Oscar 1, which was back in 1962. That was only up for a really short period of time. But showing you some of the other satellites, I mean, this one here, this AO40, you know, quite a massive satellite. And then we're going through to the more recent ones, which obviously we're back to the International Space Station, which is still up there. And I believe it's due to be decommissioned in 2030. That's when they're supposed to be bringing that down, in 2030. But that's still in use, and that's got a number of facilities on that. For crossband repeating, but it also does a few others. And then you've got the CubeSats like the G0MTQ, and you might have heard of things like FunCube, which is another sort of satellite system. So that's just a bit of an example of some of the evolution, if you like, of the amateur satellites over a period of time. And they're launching them out very regularly. They're coming out very, very regular, these things. And I'm probably not up to date at all with what's up there now. bit about how they work. So they're basically a repeater up in the sky, and obviously you're all familiar with repeaters, which work between the satellite and ground stations. They support different modes, FM voice, for example in SO50, and also the International Space Station, that uses the crossband repeater on the International Space Station, and they use FM voice. And you've also got linear transponders on the satellites like RS-44, which is a Russian satellite, and that has SSB and CW transmissions. But you can also have digital modes like packet, APRS, slow scan TV, and all sorts of other things going on as well. They operate in different orbits, as I mentioned before, low Earth orbiting, medium Earth, or geostationary. As you can see, the higher the orbit, the larger the footprint's going to be. And obviously, the bigger the footprint, the more stations are going to be able to work that. You've got a bigger coverage. In this example above, you know, you're talking about there from Iceland over to Libya. But obviously, depending what orbit the satellite's on at any particular point in time, when that footprint starts to come into your coverage area, then obviously you can work anything within that footprint. In theory, depends on elevation, all sorts of other factors. But if they're up pretty high, then there's a good chance you're going to be able to work them. So if any stations are within the footprint area, you'll be able to work those stations. Low orbits, you've got a shorter pass time, because these things are travelling fast. If they're closer to the Earth, they're passing past pretty quickly. I mean, the ISS is about 400 kilometres above the Earth, and you get about a 10-minute pass at the most on a good pass. Sometimes much shorter than that. This is, I wish I could get rid of that, but sorry about that. It's on that system somewhere. This is just giving an example of SO50. Obviously, to get the satellite, they use different frequencies, one for the uplink, one for the downlink. And in this particular example, the downlink is on 436.8 FM, and the uplink 145850. Also need a CTCSS tone to activated, and that starts off a 10-minute timer. And the reason for that is because obviously these things have got batteries on board, and you don't want to be leaving the system open all the time, draining the systems. They've got solar panels as well, so they charge you up depending on where they are in relationship to sun and all the rest of it. What do you need to use them? Obviously, it helps if you've got a transceiver. Preferably full duplex is better. You can do it with two separate systems. VHF and UHF transceiver. You could do that if you want to do it that way, but it's much easier if you've got a full duplex setup. And obviously directional aerial, because obviously you're tracking this thing as it's going across on its orbit. If you've got a rotatable beam, much better. Or you can use the handheld arrow antennas. I don't know if anybody's ever seen them, but that's a photo of it on the right. I used to have one. I wasn't particularly successful using that, because you're trying to make notes of where the satellite's going to be passing, and then you're twiddling the thing around, and you're trying to control your radios at the same time. It's quite fiddly, but lots of people do it. They have a lot more success than I ever had, but I couldn't get away with it very well. And you obviously need some tracking facilities, because you need to be able to track when the satellite's going to be coming in your area, or you can look on and get some of the predictions of the times, but much better if you can have live tracking going on. And you need to be able to compensate for Doppler effects as well. Some of the radios, I mentioned about full duplex, but that's an example of some of the sort of radios you could use. Could use handhelds, but I think, I don't know if that one that came with a full duplex system, I'm not quite sure, but I think it may well be. And certainly down there with the IC 910, FT736, they're full duplex. And you can also do it on things like the Fun Cube SDR thumb drive thing to do it as well. These are again some of the aerials that you can use. Again, using the arrow type aerials, and they very often have a duplexer on them as well. I think they sell different versions of the arrow antennas. That's a 3 element on 2 meters and 7 elements on 70 centimeters. And you get the diplexer for a single cable feed, which obviously makes life a bit easier. This is what I use at my setup. That's my granddaughter helping me to put my latest aerial together, which was a big signal quad, which has got 4 elements on 2 meters. That's the one on the right. And I think it's 8 elements on, 8 elements on the 70 sems. 2 separate feeds for it. And then it also helps, in my case, I'm using the G5500 rotator, which is obviously azimuth and elevation. It's nice if you can alter both. And it helps as well if you've got automatic tracking, which is why I've got that little tracking system at the bottom, so that interfaces with my tracking software. And the idea is that as soon as the satellite, you configure it so that when the satellite footprint starts to come into your area, you get a bit of a warning and the thing automatically tracks the satellite from the beginning of its pass to the end of its pass. Here's a do-it-yourself version, and there's a link there to the bottom of that, but it's a do-it-yourself version there. Just using a broom handle, I think it was, for this particular job. And there's the dimensions of the thing, and that's a 2 element, 3 element and 4 element dimensions. If anybody finds any of this of interest, I can always send you the slides later if you want them. But if you buy the Arrow job, they're quite expensive, about 250 quid or something like that. So they're not a cheap option. Tracking software, there's quite a bit of free software around for both Android and for Windows systems, and no doubt they've got Linux as well. But TrackSat is a free download for Android. Ham Radio Deluxe is the one that I tend to use, but I also use SAT PC32, which is the one, that's a screenshot of it on the right. But you can also get details of the passes on N2YO, which provides details of the different satellites and the predictions, etc. And of course you can get them off AMSAT's website. That's just an example of the screenshot for the satellite tracking on Ham Radio Deluxe. I actually did that one yesterday. The thing on the green is obviously, I was lucky yesterday because I got a pass right almost over the top of us. So, it was a good pass. So that it's shown there in green. And these are all the ones that are showing the passes during the rest of the day. So as I was saying, with a lot of these, you get multiple passes during the daytime. And on the top right there, that's showing some of the rotator control. I didn't have the rotator on here, so that's inaccurate, because obviously that should be pointing down here somewhere, shouldn't it? But the rotator wasn't actually wired up on this particular example. I'll just put it on to give you an example of the screenshot. That was actually a live satellite track for the, what was I using there? Not sure, but that's a live track. Just an example, RS44 linear transponder, and you usually have 20 kilohertz of bandwidth. Uplink is on 145.965, but you have plus or minus 30 kilohertz. Downlinks on 435640436, plus or minus 30 kilohertz. You also have a beacon, which is on 435.605. And you'll recognise that with it transmits its call sign of RS44. The ISS, has anybody ever worked any of these as a matter of interest? No? The ISS is quite an easy repeater to work, as indeed is RS44. They're my two favourites, I would say, at the moment. You've got an uplink on 145990, but you've got to use a 67 Hz CT CSS tone as well to activate the repeater. Downlinks on 4378, 800. It also has voice contacts on, depending on which region in the world you're in. For us, it's on 145, 800. So sometimes you hear the crew, sometimes they'll go on the radio and have contacts as they're passing, depending on obviously what else they're doing at the time. But I have heard them on a number of occasions, chatting to people as they've been passing over. They've got a packet radio station on there as well, 1200 baud FSK. The uplink is 145825, and the downlink obviously on the same. So they do slow scan TV, and I've had quite a lot of pictures from the satellite. At various times they put slow scan TV transmissions on, and they're quite interesting. Usually use this PD 120 mode. So about making the QSO, usually quite short QSOs, because the passes are sort of 10 to 15 minutes, obviously longer on linear transponders. It's usually the usual thing is CQ satellite, or CQ Oscar 73, or CQ space station, or whatever else. Do the usual signal report and your maidenhead locator. And obviously use the minimum power that you need to complete the contact. Lower the power when it's directly overhead, because obviously you've got less distance. Typical QSO, as I said, usually short. The procedure, be prepared, get all your details of your passes in advance so you're all ready for it. If you're going to configure, if you're lucky enough to have perhaps cat control on your radio, make sure that's all set up to do your tracking. Estimate your Doppler correction and set your initial transmit and receive frequencies. You can get all this information off the AMSAT site or any of the other bits of information I gave you there, some of the other sources you can get them from, like the Ham Radio Deluxe gives you all the times of the passes and when you can expect them to be there. Usually you'll wait for the beacon, and when you hear the beacon, you know it's coming into the footprint's coming into your area, and then you put out a little bit of a transmission, and usually you can hear yourself coming back. Sometimes you've got to fiddle around quite a bit to get that to match up, but usually you can hear yourself with a bit of luck, and then you can call somebody if things allow you to. Keep tuning the transmitter to keep the receive frequency constant. Bit about Doppler, and I thought you're all familiar with Doppler effect. This is where you get changes in radio frequency, because obviously the satellite's moving so quickly relative to where you are on Earth. And the simple way to think it is that as the satellite approaches you, its signal sounds higher in frequency. A bit like when you stand on the roadside and you hear a car go past. You know, it always sounds higher frequency, higher tone, and then goes past and it gets lower and it's moving away from you. A bit like that with the satellite. And they're traveling at thousands of kilometres an hour, these things. Well, obviously, why it matters to operators, that should have been how do you compensate for Doppler effect? If you don't adjust the Doppler, your receiver might drift off frequency and you lose the signal. On UHF, the shift can be up to plus or minus 10 kilohertz, enough to miss narrowband signals. Operators often use preset memory channels, which is one of the best ways to deal with the Doppler changes. So if you know basically where the satellite's going to come into orbit, you know, which is your acquisition of signal, if you know when it's going to come, you know as it's approaching you, you're probably going to be a bit higher in frequency, so you'll set that. And then you'll set one for when it's going to be up above you, and you do all sorts of intermediate steps, so you can set it gradually increasing all the time or decreasing to suit. So, general rule of thumb for VHF, Doppler shift is modest. You don't usually get much shift on VHF. UHF is much more pronounced, especially for narrowband modes. So, for example, with this, if you were using the ISS, you would, for your downlink, what you might do is a practical setup. You might put your receiver fixed at 145/800. You don't usually have to move that. You can usually leave that there. With your transmit side, you step it through many memory channels. So you'd set up your transmitter to have a number of different memory channels. So AOS, when you know that the acquisition of signal, when it's coming towards you, you could set it at 437.795 for the uplink. And then as it comes to the mid-pass, 437.800. And as you're losing it, 437.805. And as I said, you could do steps before and after to suit. So you've got quite a lot of different steps, and all you have to do then is move your memory button around to be able to constantly work the satellite. And you can usually hear it when you're calling through. You can usually hear when you're calling, when you hear someone and you call them, you can usually hear yourself as well. The thing about using things like SAT PC32 and Ham Radio Deluxe, if you've got a computer-aided transceive facility, so if you're using CAT control, it'll compensate for the Doppler automatically. So when you put in the latest elements for the satellite, and it's up to date, it'll usually track all that for you more or less automatically. So it'll compensate on the receive and transmit if necessary. Just a little link here. If you want to know where all the current active satellites are, you can go on to AMSAT, and there's a status page on AMSAT where you can get all the latest active satellite information. And people can fill in a report when they hear the satellite or work the satellite. They can actually fill in a report, and you can see all the entries there and the different denotions. You can tell you whether it's a voice repeater, whether it's purely data, etc., or whether there's conflict with the signal. You can put an entry on there. And I think one of the ones who's on very often is 2M0SQL. He's one of the main ones who puts regular reports, and I do them myself from time to time as well. So it gives you an idea of how active the satellites are and who's hearing it and this sort of thing. So it's a good idea to get your information off there about the most active and latest satellites. Some handy links on there. AMSAT UK is a good reference for anybody wanting to find out a lot. I mean, I'm skipping over this pretty fast tonight, but if you want to go in and get a lot more detail, and there is quite a lot of information about satellites, I'm really skating over the top of it, and I'm making it very oversimplistic, I think. But there is quite a lot involved in working them. I mean, the stuff that Andrew do is pretty complicated stuff, but there's a lot here in terms of getting things like timings and passing of passes, Doppler effects and all that, which you don't get, of course, so much with geostationary, as far as I'm aware. Not as obvious, I wouldn't think. Whereas you do get rapid changes in with the Doppler effect on the orbiting satellites. And of course, you've got to do all the tracking, which you don't have to do with your geostationary, because once you've fixed your dish, you're basically in business. Sometimes awkward, depending on where you are, Andrew, to fix your dish, but especially some of the places you get to. But you don't have any of that to do. Whereas with this, you've got to make sure that you're pointing to the satellite as it's moving very quickly, and you've got to keep track of that all the time if you want to work it at all. So there's a satellite database, so you can go into that, and that'll give you a lot of information again about the different satellites. It tells you the different modes, the different frequencies they're on, up and down frequencies, this sort of stuff. They're pretty low power, these satellites. I mean, they're only running a matter of a few watts, so there's not a lot coming from them. But of course, hopefully, if it's a fairly good pass, they're pretty high, there's nothing blocking your signal, so you don't need a lot of power to work them either. So the lower, keep your power down as much as you can. And in fact, it's not a good idea with the transponders. If you're putting too much of a big signal into it and you've got a lot of output coming from these transponders, then you can overdrive them and also run down the batteries on them things as well. So you use the minimum amount of power, and you don't want to be splatting over everybody else as well. And you do get quite big pile-ups, especially on the linear transponders. You've got Heavens Above, which is another useful link, and that shows you where the satellites are. And I think you can get that for Android as well. I think you can download that onto your phone. And then you've got the N2YO website, again, which has got a lot of information about the different satellites. I'm going to show you here, this is me recording a school contact from the space station.
November Alpha 1 India Sierra Sierra, you're coming in a bit garbled, but still understandable. Help me. Over.
That's over 1,000 miles away at that point.
Ready for questions. Over. Harper, that's a great question. It is hot when we're facing the sun, and it is very cold when we are blocked from the sun. And so in our spacesuits, actually, we are the only source of heat, our human body, so it's very important we don't get too cold. The only other thing we have is some fingertip heaters on our gloves, and for cooling, we have water that runs through a suit that we wear to help cool us down. Over. Rebecca, yes, definitely. No, I'm just kidding, actually. I think we each have different, as individuals, different things we bring to the table, and strengths and weaknesses. And so I would say both boys and girls can be very well suited for. Oh, that's a good question, because you may know we orbit the Earth 16 times a day, so we're seeing either a sunrise or sunset about every 45 minutes. We actually operate off Greenwich Mean Time here on the International Space Station, and so to help us recognize if it's supposed to be day or night, we set our lights brighter during the day and turn them off, or set them on a lighter mode during the, or a darker mode during the evening. Over. Dexter, I actually absolutely love living and working up here, especially floating and looking back at Earth is really fun. But I do miss a lot of things about Earth, especially my friends and family. So maybe if I could bring them with me, I would be happy to spend the rest of my life in space. Over. Ethan, being up here has been very eye-opening and given me a whole new perspective to the way we see the Earth as a, united entity in this beautiful planet with everyone we know and love on it. So I hope in the future for mankind we can have more people come up to space and get this perspective, and that we can eventually go further than we've gone before by going back to the moon and eventually onto Mars. Over. be happy to know we already do bring our holidays up here. We have an international crew here, and we celebrate holidays from all over the world up here. You know, we have Christmas and Hanukkah coming up soon, and so we'll definitely be celebrating those up here. Over. Audrey, for me, just seeing how vast space is and how much there is and how many different planets and galaxies there are, I can't imagine that we wouldn't find other living organisms eventually. I don't know if they'll be as advanced as humans are, but I think we will find other living organisms. Over. Joseph, a lot of people feel a little dizzy and disoriented when they first get to space because of the weightlessness. But once you get adjusted to that, no, you don't get dizzy anymore. Over.
Wondered why we can't hear the other side of the transmission? Anybody?
It's on land.
Pardon?
It's on land, isn't it?
Well, if you notice, the school is actually in Kent, and obviously I'm pointing upwards, so I'm not going to hear the station in Kent. So you know that's.
She was effectively using it simplex.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, I wouldn't have heard the Kent school, whatever, anyhow. And they're obviously going up on a different link, so it's using. It's actually a duplex contact. So they're coming down on one frequency and they're transmitting on another frequency. So obviously I'm not going to hear the transmission side because it's in Kent. I mean, even with really great conditions, I would be very lucky to hear Kent, especially when the aerials are pointing upwards. And they are beams, so they are focused in a particular area. So that's the reason for that. I'll just go past. I'd just also like to thank David Bowman because I actually used some of his slides, and I did email him and ask him if I could have permission. So I saw some of his stuff and I thought I'd use some of the slides he'd used, but most of it's my own, but I just thought I'd pinch a few of his as well. Any questions?
Was the antenna tracking?
Yeah.
I thought I saw it move, different positions, so it was automatically tracking the satellite.
Yeah. The little box I showed you there with my aerials, that little box is interfaced with the satellite tracking program, and so it automatically tracks across as soon as the satellite comes into the footprint comes into view. I get a 2-minute warning from the satellite tracking software, and then that starts off automatically the rotator, and then it'll automatically track it all the time it's passing over.
I suppose it's something similar like telescopes on watching a planet, so that will automatically track as well, won't it?
Yeah, you can do all that with software.
It's very impressive to see.
Yeah.
Even when your beam is pointing just above the horizon.
Yeah.
And you know it's coming, it automatically moves itself.
Yeah.
And then it alters, and it's really
impressive. Well, you saw it there when it was almost coming past overhead. I was straight up, pointing more or less straight up.
And then it will turn and come round.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing again about having the beam, and also if you're fairly high above the horizon, you can work the satellite much sooner because you've got a fairly clear view of the horizon. And I can usually track them for quite a long way as well, so it works the other way. So I'm picking them up early, but also I can follow them a lot further as well. It does make a difference when you can certainly track the stuff. I mean, you don't have to have all that stuff that I've got there. I mean, before I got the automatic system, I used to just press the rotator button and follow it around. But it's obviously a lot easier this way,
You can work them with a white stick.
Of course you can.
Some of them.
You can. In fact, you can use it with a rubber duck on your handheld. I don't know if you've ever done that, but the first time I had the satellites was actually on a handheld. Was on a standard C great opening going on, it was the satellites. So you can hear them on your handheld. If the pass is right, you know, if they're coming over more or less overhead, you can hear them quite well. So you don't need fancy beams or anything like that, but it helps. Obviously, if you want to do it seriously, like everything else.
Yeah, the snag with the white stick is you get a null as it comes over the top.
That's right. You'll lose them very quickly.
Yeah.
You know, you'll only have them more or less over the top of you.
Well, no, when it's right over the top, there's a null on the end.
There's a null there.
So you get it coming in, then
Yeah.
you lose it, and then you get
Yeah.
it again.
You won't get a lot of it.
No.
Again, depending on the pass. And I mean, these things are moving fast.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, 17,000 miles an hour, I think, is the space station.
Yeah.
You know, these things are whipping past at a fair rate of knots. So trying to keep that with a white stick isn't easy.
Yeah.
You know, but you can do it. Certainly done it before. But you know, when I first started off, I was doing it on AHF. But I haven't done the orbiting satellites for a while, and I'm sorry, I'm a bit rusty on it, to be honest. And the 9700, which I had there, or the 7900 is it? 9700, I've no longer got. And my plan tonight was actually to use that and do a working satellite, so I could just do that and then talk around that. But anyhow, as it happens, I've sold the 9700 and I haven't got my other radio programmed up, so I use some of my old stuff really I thought I would just talk through it. But if nothing else, I hope it's given you an idea of a little bit about what orbital satellites are about. I mean, Andrew did that great talk for us on the geostationary satellites and how we work them. But this is another side of it, and there's a lot of them around. I mean, there's loads of these orbital satellites, and not only amateur satellites, but there's all sorts of weather satellites and navigation, GPS, and all sorts of other things. And of course, television, Sky, and all the other stuff up there. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of these things. There's going to be a lot of space debris, without any doubt. A lot of space debris.
It's a wonder they don't bump into each other, some of them.
Yeah, yeah.
You can see the space station coming across them.
You can, yeah. You get visual passing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is not moving.
Usually early in the morning, or you know, just before dark at night, fully dark at night. Anybody seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Really interesting to watch it. Really interesting to watch it.
You wonder what it is.
Yeah.
It's like Sirius coming over. Yeah.
But you know, if you've got anything like a decent aerial, have a listen sometime. Have a look at ONSAT. See where the frequencies are for the satellite passes, especially RS-44, which is a really good one. That's a linear satellite. You get a lot longer pass, and that's sideband, and it's really interesting to hear them, and you get some really good signals from quite distant places. And the International Space Station is worth listening to as well. You get some good FM contacts on the space station, so you'll hear them quite easy if you've got anything. You know, you'll hear them on your white stick fairly easily when they're anywhere near. Okay, thanks.
That's it. Yes,
Okay, thanks.